Miller, I feel like you're on a crusade saying people are overlooking this old school RPG.
I don't fault anyone for overlooking it. I don't think it's a great release date, to be honest. It's Horizon week. It's Switch week.
It's Night in the Woods week. Suriel, are you enjoying that game?
I beat it. Yeah, I loved it.
Also overlooked. But what is this game and who is it for?
Torment, Tides of Numenera is the spiritual successor to Planescape Torment, which is another game that a lot of people overlooked.
Don't turn your podcast off. Stay with us. It's one that people always bring up, like when you talk about the greatest writing in video games. People, like the hardcore, cool PC crowd, will always bring up that old game and be like, if you haven't played that, you can't even talk about the subject.
I mean, one of the interesting things is that like there were games like Baldur's Gate that were as close to sort of the mainstream CRPG, right, as you could get back in that time period. And then Planescape Torment came out, and it was like the weird quote unquote like thinking man's game or something, right? Like it was like this weird existential exploration of identity and stuff like that. That the main character had this weird amnesia thing going on.
In an RPG?
Let me write this down.
Miller.
And it was a very strange setting. It was by a wide margin the weirdest of the old D&D second edition campaign settings, Planescape. Which
is it like an ethereal
funky
zone?
Planescape was just the idea that like let's take the concept of there being these like other planes of existence, which has always kind of been there within the D&D fiction, and let's do a dedicated setting about people who like live in this city that is at the apex of all these different or this nexus, this meeting point of all these different dimensions.
So people are like phasing in and out of existence as
they just kind of like live in this strange place. I mean, it was also about traveling between those other dimensions.
Okay.
But it was much weirder. It had its own sort of like language thing going on where all the characters spoke with this weird slang, and it was just very strange.
So that's the old game, and now there's a new game called Torment.
Yes.
That is available on consoles and PC. So what is this, and how does it connect to that? And is it D&D? What?
It isn't. So the weird transition there is that like what they are doing a spiritual successor for is the sort of feel of that game, right? But they're not connected with D&D anymore. They are instead connected to a setting called Numenera, which is a tabletop RPG from Monty Cook Games.
Wait a minute. So they're abandoning D&D because those rights are complicated.
Sure.
But instead of just making something new that's inspired by that, they're connecting it to a separate tabletop game?
That's right.
Okay. Cork, are you following this? Are you on board for this?
Numenera, baby. Monty Cook Games.
So the important thing to understand really is that like there is a legacy here, but it's an unusual one. The legacy they're trying to follow is one of like, let's focus on what the feeling of that game was, right? The idea that is very bizarre. It had weird characters. It was less focused on combat and more focused on like conversations and non-combat solutions to crises, that kind of thing. And that's what they've done with Torment. It's this very unusual setting. And it's got a great backdrop of RPG progression systems, and when you get into combat, the combat works well, and it's an interesting kind of system. But it really is focused on these kind of conversations and dialogues and reading of text that makes it almost like reading a sci-fi novel more than playing a game, except you're dictating how it moves forward.
This sounds like Night in the Woods, Suriel.
I mean, it's different. I mean, they're both very similar in sort of they'll both get you to think about your place in the world.
Okay.
The way that Torment goes about it is that they sort of, I guess I can liken it to the first time you go to like a big in-depth astrology or astronomy class, and they tell you, oh, planets form over the course of billions of years, and the planet was molten for like hundreds and thousands of years, and you'll get histories from people that are just like decades and decades and hundreds of years long, and they'll make you feel very small, like a very small part of that universe. Like in the first town you encounter, there's a character named Genocide. and
great.
and
He's
he's like this,
No, this is actually a great example of the weirdness of this.
He looks like a guy who would be called Genocidal looks like.
He's got these big spiky armor.
He looks like a giant robot from the 90s.
He was in Guar? Okay.
Yeah, basically. But when you talk to him, he just looks like this guard who just happens to be near, I think it's a fountain or something. And you talk to him and he was just, oh, my story is that I was a race of warriors that, we ruled the planet for several years, for several hundreds of years or something. And eventually the humans defeated us and enslaved us. And now they forced me to guard this one area for the rest of my life. But I'm immortal, so I will never die. So I get to see, his
punishment.
Yeah, it's his punishment is to live forever and see peace, basically, for the rest of his existence.
Race of warriors.
Yeah, because it's a race of warring people. And he talks about, well, at least I get the satisfaction of seeing everyone around me die. And so
he will ultimately be the victor.
Yeah, he will
because
win
he will
out in
outlive
the end.
all things.
And so it's this extended dialogue tree. And as far as I've played the game, you never he never comes up again.
No,
that is his entire story. He is just one person in this small town.
The weird thing in Torment is that every single character that you meet has a crazy story like that.
So it's just
there are hundreds of characters.
So it's just a funneling down of man, I've had 1,000 different one-off sci-fi ideas.
Yeah.
And now every character's, hey, what about this? Have you ever thought about this angle? This is what it's like. And there's just no rules, really. Everyone's just free to tell an interesting little anecdote that'll make you think about a concept.
I mean, I don't want to imply that nothing happens. There are main quests.
It's the Seinfeld of cosmic horror.
It's not that.
Okay.
There are main quest lines that are carrying you forward. The main story focuses on the idea that there is this one man who at some point in the history of this world has discovered a way to transition his consciousness from one body to the next. And as such, he has become what people call the changing god.
Like that Denzel Washington movie nobody remembers.
It's exactly like that.
Just like that. And you, as a character in the story, wake up falling from orbit.
Speaking of fallen.
And I want to. And by the way, I want to. After I tell this story, I want to ask Jeff what happened in his instance here. But you're falling from orbit. You have no memory of who or what you are before this, and you're about to hit the ground. And you have a few moments to sort of look around and think about things as you fall before you apparently die.
Sounds like my first marriage, Jeff Cord.
And
prom night.
It turns out that you are one of the cast-offs, one of the bodies that has been left behind by this guy who casts off old bodies and goes into new bodies, and
they call you cast-off?
The name of your character is the last cast-off.
I like that idea. So it's such a video game thing. It's the equivalent, for analogy, Cork will understand. In Driver in San Francisco, if you're driving just your car off of a cliff and then you teleport out at the last second, what's the story of the person left in that car?
Yeah. So you are this guy. You die, basically. Part of the idea is that these cast-offs are built to be very powerful and regenerative or whatever. And so you wake up in this weird place that you've crashed into, and the story sort of proceeds from there, with you trying to figure out who you are, who or what the changing god is, kind of understanding your place in the world. It's very sort of focused on this metaphysical, philosophical kind of thing.
Yeah, and this is from the Wasteland 2 team? Is that right?
I think it's powered by the Pillars of Eternity engine.
It is,
right?
yeah.
Oh, so basically, I'm trying to figure out the audience here. If you like Pillars of Eternity, Wasteland 2, kind of that new age revival of the old CRPGs, and you also just chilling and thinking about some big concepts.
I think that's too limiting.
Okay.
Here's what I think this game is for. I sometimes have a sense, even though I love classic fantasy and science fiction, I have shot a lot of aliens from a spaceship, and I have fought a lot of dragons with a wizard staff in my left hand and a sword in my right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, brother.
These are the core kind of conceits of fantasy and science fiction storytelling are there because they're really fun. But for somebody who has played or read or watched a lot of that stuff over their life, there is a kind of malaise that can come on. of like, dragons are awesome, man. I love dragons, but man, another game about killing dragons, another novel about, coming of age as a young wizard. Like these are things that like these tropes show up again and again and again in speculative fiction of various types. Numenera is the answer for people who are like, I want something completely different. I still love speculative fiction. I love the idea of like exploring the outer edges of like what's possible and having kind of like weird musings about the ways that the future could be, or what might happen if I met a creature that's an entirely different species from me. Stuff that isn't real, right? But they're sick of the normal stuff. That's who would like Torment. That and somebody who's willing to do a lot of reading.
Yes, it's a lot of reading.
So I started playing the game.
Please.
I was super excited because I had like done a couple of seen some videos and posted them on the site, and it looked like a super interesting game. So I'm like, here we go, fire this baby up. And it starts off. There's like some text, and there's like swirling void in the background, and this voice is like, "You awaken in a body. Your skin is hard and tough. You are a boy or girl." I'm like, I'm gonna be a lady. All right. You have curves and hips, and you're falling down. You're falling down.
Were you the narrator for this game?
I might be. It was an extended riff. They said go with it. So you're falling. And I'm like, go faster. And it's like, all right, you go down and you make your body shaped like a javelin or whatnot, and you're just hurling down. What do you want to do? You could like choose to look around or stuff. Keep in mind, this is just all you're seeing is text and this black void. I'm like, go faster. And I just do that a few times, and then I basically hit terminal velocity, smash into the planet, and it kicks me to a game over screen. So I didn't see. I immediately went back to Overwatch. I still have not seen a single frame of gameplay for Torment, Tides of Numenera, but I'm definitely
that's
curious.
The canonical ending in your mind.
Yeah. In my mind, that hero, the cast off. Yeah.
There are things beyond which even the last cast off cannot recover. And Jeff found them immediately.
Exactly. It gave me a trophy. And I was like, because I knew that one of the conceits too is if you die, you go back to this loop, right? It's like a cycle. So I thought, oh, cool. Now let's see what really. Not game over. Oh well.
When your brain doesn't even exist anymore, maybe you just can't.
You're not Wolverine.
Yeah, no. I think there's things you can't survive. But yeah, like in between sequences, when there's lots of times in the game that you do die, like someone stabs you and you die, or something like that. And when that happens, you enter a labyrinth in your own mind where there are figments of consciousness of sometimes other people who are living there, and you interact with them before you return to the land of the living to...
So this lives up to the old game in your mind then?
Oh, I absolutely think it lives up to the old game,
wow.
and more so. I really, really like the ways that they keep things bizarre for every step of the way. You keep thinking you're encountering something that's like, this super weird thing must be the definitive weird thing in this game. And it's not. It just keeps getting stranger. And as I was alluding to before, there is a main quest about your identity and about your connection to the changing god and all that kind of stuff that does weave through the whole thing. But there are there's constantly characters and interactions that you come into contact with that don't have any particular relevance to that. But they're just interesting. And I found myself at times... I mean, sometimes it's literally just you pick up a weird item, and it's not like a special powered item or anything. It's just a thing that you found, like what they call an oddity. But and it could sit in your inventory for the rest of the game, and you could do nothing with it. But if you do look at it and you say, "Oh, it says I can use this item. It's just this weird sphere." All right, we'll use item, and then there'll be this whole lengthy dialogue options of things where you have choices of like, well, when you touch the sphere in this particular way, it opens a vortex into another dimension and your mind is pulled into it. What do you want to do next?
And this will just be in the middle of some
just something else.
It's like if every episode of the Twilight Zone happened at once.
Yes.
Basically. So like while this is happening, now this is also happening. There's this strange other world, and there's also this other alien species that's going to kill everything.
If you've listened to my podcast with Jeff Cork, where we talk about Twilight Zone for every episode, we do have a unified Twilight Zone theory, so we know exactly what you're talking about. So.
The Dummyverse.
I think to go back to what like I was alluding to before, it's that you are in a constant state of wonder because almost everything you encounter is something that is not a trope that you've seen used.
Love it, yeah.
In a billion other games. Just to throw out one more example, one of my favorites is this guy that you run across who's not, I mean, he's vaguely connected to one side quest at one point, but there's one guy you run into, it's a merchant stall, and you go up to him and he's got a name, and I don't remember it off the top of my head. But you meet him and he's got this one name, and he's like, and you look behind him and there's another guy with the same name, and you're like, but he's older. And you're like, is that your father? He's like, no, that's me. That's just me when I'm older. And you're like, what? And he's like, yeah, that's me when I'm older. Apparently in a couple of months sometime, he won't tell me when, I'm going to get sucked into another dimension that pulls me back in time, and I'm going to travel across a million different dimensions and fall in love and have all these crazy adventures before I get plopped back down in this dimension when I'm younger, and I'll meet myself. And sure enough, you go talk to the old guy, and he's like, yep.
Checks out.
That's what happened. And that's just a guy. That's just a guy that you meet, and he's like, hey, did you want to buy anything?
Sell me your trinkets.
Like, it's weird stuff like that, and I love that about the game. I mean, at times, if taken in heavy doses, and
sounds like the writers took some heavy doses.
if you're playing it nonstop for hours on end, like I was when I'm reviewing the game, there is the potential for it to be like, can someone just be like a guy who just will talk to me?
Is this like an album that is like just comprised of guitar solos?
Yeah. Yes. I think that's a good comparison.
One thing to note is that Miller, you said you played on PC, right?
Yeah, I did.
I'm playing on a PlayStation 4 Pro, and it's really stuttery in terms of frames.
Yeah.
So if you have the option, I would say go on PC.
I would agree.
And the other thing is that this game looks like a game that it was a successor to a 2001 game. I think that's when Planescape.
It's a little Diablo 2-ish.
Yeah, it looks like Diablo 2. Like you zoom in on those models and they don't look much better than when you zoomed out.
I mean, it definitely.
It leans a lot on the text, I think, and
yes.
I don't think that's that big of an. It's almost like the images are an abstraction just to make you sort of, okay, this building is here, this thing is here. I need to go from this thing to this thing, but the text is really what you want to pay attention to. Also.
Yeah,
and the art is beautiful, but it's just in that slightly older style.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a pixelated house, but the house has a soul.
Yeah,
it's been extinguished for 6,000 years,
and that's what I really like about it is that because all these stories are so crazy, it makes your own story, even though it's important to you, it feels like this is just another story in that universe. You're not the chosen one, because everybody's a chosen one, basically.
This is really uncanny how much it resembles our 1-2 switch conversation from earlier in the podcast. Yeah, it's really well.
A lot of the big beats.
I would bet
there's a character
true.
named Genocide in both.
What'd you score, Torment?
I gave it an 8.5.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's really good. I know I know a lot of people aren't going to play it this week. I know that Horizon is out, which weirdly, by the way, is another post-apocalyptic world, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting. But I know Horizon's out. I know the Switch is out. I know there's other games coming soon that are going to be occupying people's attention, not the least of which are things like Mass Effect, which is not that far off.
Yeah. Game Club coming soon.
But sometime, I think if you're looking for originality in game design and you're looking for like stories that go off the beaten path from what you've come to expect out of science fiction and fantasy storytelling, you should try to find a way to check this game out. And even though it's not as great on console, I would agree with that. From what I've seen of it, it's totally playable. If that's your only option, I don't think you're gonna like be totally bummed out to have to play it on console. But yeah, play it on PC if you can. But the top level concept is just play it.
And you can beat it in like 2 minutes.
Yeah,
exactly.
Sure.
Thank you so much for watching this excerpt from the Game Informer Show podcast. You can click right here if you want to subscribe and listen to the audio version of the full show. Full episodes air every Thursday, and they feature Game Informer editors sitting around talking about the biggest reviews, previews. We talk about exclusive impressions of Game Informer's cover stories. We have long-form developer interviews, everything that's great in gaming. So every Thursday, be sure to check it out.